My husband lost his voice after a stroke, but when he began writing down what he had planned to do to me, I realized staying alive meant making him die, one spoonful at a time. The first time I found a note, I thought it was a mistake. A confusion brought on by the stroke. The paper was curled beside the kitchen knife. The handwriting was messy, jagged. But it was his. And it said 5 words that froze my bones from the inside out: was going to kill you. I stood there in my pale blue robe, trembling, my thumb still wet from chopping tomatoes. The smell of garlic clung to the air. Outside, the rain fell in a hush. Inside, everything went still. Even Graham, slumped in his wheelchair by the fireplace, sat silently watching me, his head slightly tilted, like a predator pretending to be weak. They said the stroke had spared his life, but taken his voice. The irony wasn't lost on me. Graham had always preferred silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that corners you. A quiet so sharp it cuts. For 42 years, I lived in that silence, and now it had followed me into his sickness. I held the note like it might bite. 5 words. 5 years too late. 5 decades too familiar. Graham used to be the charming one. People loved him. At church, at the neighborhood block parties, at my book club gatherings. They'd pat me on the shoulder and say, "Eleanor, you're so lucky. He's such a gentleman." I smiled and nodded, while my stomach tied itself into knots. They didn't see the way he'd stare at me across the dinner table if I put too much salt in the soup. The way his fingers gripped my wrist just a second too long when I laughed too loud. They didn't hear the way he said stupid like it was my first name. But he never hit me. Not once. Not the kind of bruises you can point to. Just the slow erosion of being, every year, a layer stripped away until I was a quiet woman with tired eyes and 100 apologies tucked behind every sentence. The stroke hit him one morning last November. He collapsed in the hallway, clutching the wall with one hand, his mouth twisted, his voice lost. I stood there, just for a moment, and watched him crawl. Something inside me felt still. Then I called the ambulance. Now it was March. For months since the silence became louder than ever. I stared at the note again, then at the knife, then at him. "Did you write this?" I asked softly, not expecting an answer. He blinked. Slowly. Then nodded. Just once. I should have run. I should have cried. But instead, I folded the paper in half and placed it inside my recipe book. The one titled Home Comforts. Then I made his lunch. Tomato soup with grilled cheese. He always liked that. I served it with a smile and wiped his mouth like a nurse. The next morning, another note appeared. "I bought rat poison. It's in the garage." I didn't ask this time. I simply went to the garage. It was on the shelf. Unopened. Still sealed. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to his breathing. Slow, shallow. Almost fake. I imagined him standing over me with a pillow. I imagined him checking the dosage of my sleeping pills. I imagined everything. But in the morning, I made breakfast. Porridge. 1 spoonful at a time. And that's when I decided if he wanted to confess, I'd let him. Because one day, he'd write the final confession. And on that day, I'd serve the final meal. The first time I poisoned him, I was calm. Almost too calm. Like my hands had been waiting for this. Not with rage, no. Rage was loud. This was quieter. Like cleaning something dirty. Like cutting away a rot that had grown too deep. It started with a root. In the garden, behind the rosemary bush, I'd grown a small bed of foxglove. Graham thought it was decorative. Most people do. They don't know that it can slow a heart. Stun it. Like fear, brewed into petals. I ground just a fraction of it into dust. Not enough to kill. Just to unsettle. Just enough to feel like guilt. He'd been eating only soft foods since the stroke: soups, puddings, scrambled eggs. I stirred the powder into his mashed potatoes. Buttered. Lightly salted. Just the way he liked them. I even added chives from the same garden. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did. His eyes watched me too long as I lifted the spoon to his mouth. When I cleaned up the tray, I found a new note beneath the plate. "You think I don't know?" I stared at the words, hand trembling. Then I took the paper and dropped it into the sink. turned on the garbage disposal, and watched it grind his warning into pulp. That night, his breathing was more labored. I heard a wheeze. His chest rose slower, his fingers twitching. He looked smaller, softer. And yet, I still locked my bedroom door. 2 days later, I found another note, this one longer, folded neatly like a gift. In 2003, when your sister came to visit, I loosened the water heater wires. She could have died. I wanted her to. She saw too much. You never asked why it sparked that day. You thought it was faulty wiring. I dropped the paper. My sister, Carolyn. She'd flown in after her divorce, stayed a week, and left early. She said it was because of a migraine. But I remember now. The way she whispered to me in the kitchen when Graham was upstairs. Are you happy, Elle? Really? I'd told her I was fine. That she shouldn't worry. She left the next morning. I sat down at the table, my heart heavy. A sickness not from poison, but from memory. That evening, when the nurse, Laurel, came for her usual check-in, I almost told her everything. Almost. She was kind. 28. Freckles. Always wore sunflower scrubs and hummed old country songs while she changed his catheter. She smiled at me and said, "You're doing an amazing job, Eleanor." Most people wouldn't stick around. I wanted to laugh. Stick around? I had nowhere else to go. He made sure of that. My name wasn't even on the deed. Every asset, every dollar, was in his name. Always had been. I found out only last year when I tried to open a separate account. No income. No inheritance. Just his pension. And his secrets. I nodded at Laurel and handed her a glass of water. As she left, Graham stared at me. His lips curled. Not quite a smile. More like a smirk stuck in neutral. He didn't need a voice. His eyes said everything. That night, I dreamed I was in a kitchen. But everything was black, the counters, the stove, the food. And every time I opened a drawer, there were just knives. Hundreds. All facing the wrong way. No handles. Only blades. I woke up with sweat dripping down my back. And the feeling that something in the house had shifted. Like the walls were watching me. When I went to make breakfast, another note was waiting. Check the floorboards under the attic stairs. I stood frozen for a full minute before I moved. The attic stairs were creaky, we hadn't used them in years. But I climbed them slowly, one by one, heart hammering with each step. There was dust. Cobwebs. The stale scent of insulation. I pried open the loose board. Inside, a box. Small. Wrapped in a kitchen towel. My favorite towel. The one that had gone missing last spring. Inside the box, a small plastic bag with blonde hair. Mine. A lighter. A black and white photo of me from 1989, burnt at the edges. And a folded paper that said, "Just in case you ever tried to leave." I carried the box back down in silence. Placed it on the table. Sat across from him and stared. He blinked. Smiled, no teeth. And I understood. This wasn't a man undone. This was a man still in control, trying to keep control. But he underestimated one thing. This time, I was writing the ending. The funny thing about poisoning someone is that it doesn't feel the way you expect. I thought I'd feel powerful. Vindicated. But what I felt most of all was steady. Like someone who's been treading water for years and finally finds something solid beneath their feet. That night, after finding the box beneath the attic stairs, his sick little trophy case of control, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood in front of the open fridge for 10 minutes. I didn't look at the food. I looked at the shelves. Clean. Lined up. Predictable. That's what Graham always demanded, a clean fridge, organized labels, everything exactly where it belonged. Except him. He never fit anywhere, did he? The next morning, I crushed a single oleander leaf into fine powder and mixed it into his applesauce. The quantity was so small it wouldn't kill a mouse. But Graham was already weak. The poison would hum through his blood like a lullaby he couldn't wake from. As I spooned it to him, I spoke gently, like a mother to a child. "Sleepy today, aren't we?" I said with a smile. "Must be the weather." His eyes, though tired, flicked toward the tray, then back to me. Suspicion. He knew. He swallowed anyway. By mid-afternoon, his hand trembled too much to write. I could see the frustration. He kept trying to grip the pen, but it slipped through his fingers like his power falling, one letter at a time. But he still had plans. I could feel them moving behind those eyes. At sunset, he managed just 2 words. The will. My chest tightened. What will? I asked softly, already knowing. He smiled again. Like a fox playing dead. I searched the study that night. I didn't feel guilty. I felt ready. Inside the bottom drawer, behind the dusty manuals and yellowed tax forms, I found it. The most recent will, dated 6 months before his stroke. It had one name on it. His. Not mine. Everything, the house, the accounts, the stocks, would go to a charity I'd never heard of. A clean, sterile name. The Foundation for Traditional Living. I checked the name online. It didn't exist. At least, not legally. Which meant one of 2 things. Either he'd created a shell organization to move assets into, or someone had helped him do it. And that meant someone else knew. I made him stew for dinner. Chicken, carrots, broth, and just a touch of castor bean dust, carefully harvested from a plant I'd potted years ago for its pretty seeds. His spoon clattered to the tray after the 3rd bite. He leaned back, pale, sweat gathering at his temples. I wiped his face gently and kissed his forehead. I said, "Sleep, darling. I'll take care of everything." And I meant it. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, a woman stood there, mid-40s, black hair in a sharp bun, wearing a navy coat and no smile. "Mrs. Grant?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "I'm Naomi Vance. Your husband retained me as his estate attorney. He requested I come by for a private update regarding his assets. He wanted you present." I blinked. My heart knocked once hard. "He can't speak," I said. She gave a tight smile. "He said he'd write. That he's prepared." I stepped aside. Let her in. Watched as she passed the photos on the wall, all curated by him over the years, none of them including Carolyn, my sister. Or my mother. Or any proof I had a life before Graham. When she entered the living room and saw him, pale and still in his recliner, she raised a brow. "He looks worse than I expected." I almost said, "He is worse than you know." But I stayed silent. He motioned weakly for a pen and notepad. I handed it to him. His hand shook, but he scrawled slowly. Line after line. She read it with no change of expression. When he finished, she said, "You sure about this?" He nodded. She folded the paper and tucked it into her briefcase. "I'll draw up the addendum and return tomorrow." She turned to me. "He's asked to amend his will to ensure you're taken care of. Full transfer. Effective upon death. He said he owed you." I stared at him. His eyes met mine. Something new flickered there, not malice. Not regret. Something closer to surrender. And yet, I didn't believe him. Because Graham never gave without a catch. Never surrendered unless he knew another door was already open. He'd given me the house. The money. The final say. But I knew Graham. He wasn't giving me power. He was giving me a reason to stop. But I wouldn't. Not now. Because the poison wasn't just in his blood anymore. It was in mine. The silence in the house had changed. It wasn't the quiet of illness anymore. It was the stillness before a trap closes. After Naomi left with that note, the one Graham scribbled with his shaky hand, supposedly gifting me everything, I stood in the doorway and watched her car vanish down the road. Then I went straight to the kitchen. I needed something solid. I needed to cut. I chopped onions until tears streamed from my eyes, and I couldn't tell whether it was the sting or the truth burning through. The truth that Graham, the man who spent 4 decades controlling everything, down to what toothpaste I used, had suddenly decided to give me everything? No, that wasn't a gift. That was a test. And I intended to fail it on purpose. I found the old key behind the laundry machine, where he used to hide liquor bottles before pretending to be sober for the holidays. The key opened a narrow cabinet in the garage, one I hadn't looked into since 2007. Inside, a black briefcase. Locked. I pried it open with a flathead screwdriver and a lot of quiet swearing. Inside, Old documents, receipts, insurance papers, letters, and something else. A handwritten notebook, spiral-bound, the pages yellowed at the edges. The first page said, in Graham's precise, smug lettering, just in case the bitch ever snaps. My breath caught in my throat. Inside, line by line, was a record. Every mistake I'd made. Every moment of forgetfulness. Missed medication doses. A burned roast. A fall I took in 2012 that he called suspicious. My visit to the pharmacy when I asked the wrong questions. My therapist appointment from years ago listed under unstable tendencies. He had logged everything. Labeled. Dated. He'd been building a defense. A case. I wasn't supposed to outlive him. I was supposed to be discredited if I tried to speak. I dropped the notebook like it was on fire. That's when I knew the will wasn't protection. It was bait. When Naomi returned the next day, she brought the amended will. We sat in the dining room, just the two of us, while Graham sat by the window, the oxygen tube hissing quietly beside him. She slid the document across the table. He signed. Now we just need yours. I didn't pick up the pen. Instead, I said, why now? Why would he change it? After all this time. She looked at me, lips tightening. I'm not allowed to speculate. Speculate anyway. She paused. Then said quietly, in cases like this, sometimes the guilty try to atone. Especially when they know there's no second chance. I looked her in the eye. And sometimes the guilty just hide their weapons in prettier boxes. She didn't reply. I signed anyway. But not because I believed it. Because I wanted him to believe I did. That night, I sat beside him and read him a book. Jane Eyre. He always hated that one. Said the women were too mouthy. I read it slowly, one line at a time, watching him. His eyelids drooped. The poison wasn't fast, just enough to drain. To disarm. When I stood to leave, he tapped the tray. Another note. Now you have it all. Wasn't that what you wanted? I didn't answer. Because what I wanted was something he could never give me. Time. Time back. Time free. Time when I wasn't watching my words like landmines, when I wasn't apologizing for bruises I couldn't name, when I wasn't being rewritten by a man who smiled in front of others and bled me behind closed doors. He gave me the house. But I was building something else, justice. One meal at a time. The next morning, I checked the new documents. There it was, a clause tucked deep into the legal jargon. In the event of the grantor's unnatural or suspicious death, all transfers are paused pending investigation and court ruling. I stared at the line. Clever bastard. Even in silence, he was playing God. But that's the thing about gods, they think they're untouchable, until the people they hurt stop praying. It started with a clicking sound. Barely there. A soft, mechanical tick, behind the bookshelf, near the fireplace. I only noticed it while dusting, when the air was still and Graham was sleeping. At first, I thought it was the house settling. Then I remembered something Graham once told a neighbor years ago, with that smug chuckle of his. Old homes like these, they keep secrets better than people. Now I wondered if the house wasn't just keeping them, but recording them. That night, I moved silently after Graham was asleep, or at least pretending to be. I took the flashlight from under the sink and unscrewed the back panel of the living room bookshelf. Tucked inside was a small device. A camera. Wired. Hidden neatly. Too neatly. My hand went cold. I tore open the cabinet under the television. Another one, smaller. Pointed directly at the dining table. I moved to the hallway. The coat rack. The grandfather clock. The smoke detector above our bed. 4. I found 4 cameras before midnight. All wired. All active. All old. Which meant he didn't install them after the stroke. They'd been there before. Watching. Recording. I imagined the footage. Me crying quietly into the sink. Me massaging his legs. Me cleaning up after him. Me crushing petals. Stirring soup. Emptying bottles into the compost. Was he sending the footage to someone? Was Naomi in on it? Was someone watching me now? No. I hadn't come this far to choke on fear. The next morning, I dressed in my soft yellow cardigan, the one he used to compliment before pulling threads from the cuffs like he was unraveling me on purpose. I served him oatmeal with a dusting of dandelion root. Harmless. Almost sweet. Enough to stir the nerves, to make the mouth dry, the pulse quicken. I smiled. "Good morning, darling." He blinked. Smiled back. But it was different this time. Slower. As if he was trying to read me. There were no notes that day. No accusations. No threats. Just silence. And that, more than anything, terrified me. I called my niece. Her name's Juliet. 32. Sharp as a tack and twice as stubborn. Carolyn's daughter, my sister, the one Graham tried to scare off all those years ago. Juliet had always loved me, even after her mother cut ties. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. When she picked up, I almost hung up. "Hello. It's me. Eleanor." A pause. Then, "Aunt Elle, are you okay?" I almost broke. Almost let it all spill. Instead, I said, "I need someone who knows about surveillance tech." She didn't ask why. She simply said, "I'll be there in 2 hours." When Juliet arrived, she was dressed in all black and carried a laptop and 2 screwdrivers. "I don't need the full story," she said, kneeling beside the coat rack. "But you'll tell me eventually." I watched her work. Silent. Efficient. She traced wires, unscrewed panels, disconnected boxes. She mapped out where everything led, and then she froze. "This one has a transmitter," she said. "It's sending somewhere." "To who?" She looked at me. "Not sure. But not to your internet. It's an independent signal. Old school. Either wired to a recorder in the house, or sent wirelessly to a nearby receiver." "What kind of nearby?" "Within 300 feet, maybe." I stared out the window. The neighbor across the street, Mr. Rollins, had always been close with Graham. A chess buddy. Retired cop. No. Too obvious. But the shed in our own backyard. Graham always kept it locked. That night, I went out with a crowbar. Inside the shed, behind rows of useless tools and rusted jars, was a safe bolted to the floor. And beside it, a black recorder. Blinking. Tapes. Labeled by date. I took 3 at random and tucked them into my coat. Went back inside. Locked every door. Played one of the tapes. It was audio only. She said she didn't take the checkbook. She's lying. She always lies. But I know how to make her tell the truth. You just have to take things slow. Starve the nerves first. Then the brain listens. I dropped the recorder. It was his voice. Before the stroke. Tape after tape, private monologues. Dark. Deranged. Plans. Memories. Fantasies. Him rehearsing control. And then, on the 3rd tape, something worse. If she ever kills me, they'll hear this. They'll know. I left all the pieces behind. Let her think she's clever. Let her win. She won't be able to help herself. Poison makes women brave. But guilt makes them sloppy. I stopped the tape. The room swayed. He wanted me to do this. He set me up. The next morning, I didn't poison his food. I didn't speak. I simply sat across from him, and for the first time in months, I laughed. Not out of joy, out of rage. Because now I knew I wasn't just fighting a sick man. I was fighting a ghost he'd built before he got sick. A machine. A blueprint. A trap so patient, it waited for me to believe I was free before snapping shut. The tape was marked with a red dot. Unlike the others, which had been labeled in Graham's neat, cruel handwriting, March 2nd, April 19th, backup, bedroom feed, this one was different. Handwritten, yes, but in a shakier script. Sloppier. Almost nervous. Juliet had stayed the night after discovering the signal source in the shed. She sat beside me at the kitchen table while I slid the cassette into the portable player. Neither of us spoke. The recorder clicked. Word. And then we heard it. A woman's voice. Not mine. "You said you loved me, but you never let me speak. Why are you recording this?" A pause. Then Graham's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it, even in real life. "Because I need to remember how you sound when you're sorry." My stomach dropped. Juliet looked at me. "That's not you." "No," I said. "It's not." The woman kept talking, her voice trembling, thick with tears. "I did what you asked. I told her the pills were mine. I said I made the call. I lied. I lied for you. Then a bang. A sob. Please don't lock the door again. I'm sorry, Graham. I swear, click. End of tape. I sat back in my chair, numb. Another woman. Trapped. Coerced. Tortured in the same house. Maybe before me. Maybe during. I stared at the recorder, ball rising in my throat. Graham had done this before. Groomed someone. Manipulated her. Gaslit her into compliance. Framed her for things he did. And then discarded her. I turned to Juliet. Can you find out who she is? She nodded slowly. If he used her name, maybe. I'll go through the other tapes. I went back to the attic. Not for boxes. Not for records. For a feeling. Something in me knew there had to be something he left behind that wasn't just paper. Something alive. And I found it. Behind a wall panel, hidden under a loose floorboard, was a pair of ballet flats. Small. Worn. Size 6 maybe. Inside one, a letter. Folded. Yellowed. Water-stained. Eleanor, if you ever find this, I hope you're not like me. I hope you get out. I hope you're stronger than I was. He said he loved me. That he'd leave you for me. That we'd be happy. But he made me hurt you. He made me lie. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to be free. *D. My head spun. I clutched the shoe like it was a child. D? Daniela? Deborah? Dawn? I had no memory of a woman being close to Graham. But that wasn't surprising. He never let me see his full life. Just the parts he wanted me to believe. I stared out the attic window as dust danced in the sunlight. I realized then, this was never just about control. It was about performance. He hadn't built a home. He built a theater. And every woman inside it was an actress in his story, punished for forgetting their lines. That night, I made him his favorite, butternut squash soup with a swirl of cream and a tiny dusting of hellebore root. Dangerous, yes, but masked well beneath the nutmeg. I fed him slowly. He didn't blink. Just stared at me with his unreadable eyes. And finally, he tapped the tray. A note. One line. She wasn't supposed to leave the tape. I froze. You knew, I whispered. You knew I'd find her. He didn't blink. I leaned close to his ear. Was she here while I was still your wife? He tapped once. Yes. My vision blurred. And the things you made her do, the things you blamed on me. She covered for you. He tapped again. Yes. I stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. The kitchen spun. He hadn't just tried to destroy me. He used another woman to do it, to mirror me, to replace me, to sharpen the blade he planned to drive into my back. And when she cracked, when she left him that letter, he buried her beneath floorboards and memory, like all the rest. But not this time. No more silence. Juliet found a match the next morning. Her name was Delilah Maris. She'd been reported missing in 2011. Mid-30s. No family. No official connection to Graham. But she worked at a hardware store 2 towns over. One Graham used to visit every weekend during tool season. Delilah. I knew what I had to do. That evening, I placed one more note on his tray. I know everything. You're not dying. You're disappearing. He looked up at me, and for the first time since his stroke, his eyes widened. I was no longer afraid. Because this wasn't his story anymore. It was mine. When a man spends decades rehearsing power, he never imagines someone might turn his lines against him. That night, I sat in the kitchen alone, the recorder in front of me. The room was quiet, just the ticking of the old wall clock Graham insisted we keep, even though it never told the right time. Juliet was upstairs, cataloging the tapes. She'd already found 5 with the woman's voice, Delilah, and nearly 24 of Graham talking to himself, practicing stories, scripting entire arguments that never happened. One of them caught my breath. If she poisons me, I want them to find this. I'll make it look like I was onto her. That I was scared. They'll think I was the victim. The arrogance in his voice made me sick. He was recording his own victimhood before he even got sick. Creating proof of paranoia, just enough to cast doubt. I picked up a clean tape. Inserted it. Hit record. Spoke slowly. My name is Eleanor Grant. I was married to a man who planned my death, who rehearsed his innocence, who built a home of traps and called it love. This is not a confession. This is the truth. And I'm done protecting him. I stopped the tape, labeled it Truth Number 1, put it in a separate box. Then I played one of his tapes. She's fragile. I think she might kill herself if I push a little harder. Maybe that's best. Saves me the cleanup. I labeled it Graham Grant, Murder Fantasy Number 3. One by one, I stacked them beside each other. His delusions, my truth, evidence versus narrative. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just surviving him. I was documenting him. The next day, I sent an anonymous envelope to Naomi. Inside, a copy of one of the tapes. One where he talked about framing me. I included a handwritten note. Before you protect his legacy, you should know what he rehearsed. I didn't sign it, but I knew she'd understand. Lawyers may serve the living, but they fear the dead, especially ones who leave evidence. Graham seemed weaker that day. His hand trembled more. He barely touched his food, mashed peas and creamed chicken, laced with belladonna in microscopic form. Enough to lower pressure, blur his sight, cause confusion. He tapped the tray once after I cleared it. A note. You're making a mistake. I took a pen, flipped the note over, and wrote back, so did you. 42 years ago. I left it on his lap and walked away. That night, Juliet played a tape that made both of us stop breathing. It wasn't from the house. It was from his car. A dash recorder. Labeled Private 2011. Inside, Graham was talking to Delilah. Calm. Cold. Graham, they'll believe whatever I say. I've spent years making Eleanor look unstable. You just keep doing what I say. Delilah, I'm scared. I want out. Graham, then you should have thought of that before stealing from me. Delilah, I didn't. Graham, doesn't matter. You'll say you did. Or I'll call the police and say you assaulted my wife. She's too broken to argue. Delilah, sobbing, you're a monster. Graham, no, Delilah. I'm just careful. My throat closed. Juliet looked at me, her eyes burning. You can't keep this in the dark anymore, she whispered. I'm not, I said. I'm going to burn him with it. The next day, I called the local paper. I didn't give my name. I just said, I have tapes from a dying man. Ones that might explain a missing woman's case from 2011. Are you interested? The reporter said, when and where. That evening, I placed a tape beside Graham's tray. Not food. Not poison. Just one of his recordings. Labeled in thick black ink, she knows. He stared at it, unblinking. I sat across from him, sipping tea. I won't kill you, Graham, I said softly. Not now. Not with poison. That's too clean. Too silent. I leaned in. You'll die knowing the world hears you the way I always have, as a predator in a priest's suit. He coughed. Shook. Tried to grab the tape. I pulled it away. You rehearsed your innocence, I said. Now I'm giving you a real performance. He tried to tap his tray. I didn't wait. I stood up, walked out, and let the silence close in behind me like a curtain. The newspaper didn't run the story. Not right away. The reporter, a young woman named Beth Lane, came to the house 2 days after I mailed the tape. She wore a gray coat and had wary eyes. She didn't sit when I offered. Just stood in the entryway holding a manila envelope. This is heavy, she said, and unverified. If I publish it without legal backing, I could be sued for defamation. I understand, I said quietly. That's why I have more. She raised an eyebrow. Tapes. Records. Documents. A letter from a missing woman. You want a story? I'll give you a series. Beth hesitated. Then she said something that struck deeper than she knew. Why now? I looked her in the eye. Because silence is poison too. That night, Graham didn't eat. I placed the bowl of stew in front of him untouched. A garnish of parsley. No toxins. Just heat and garlic and the smell of truth closing in. He stared at me, then pushed a new note across the table. You think you're the only one watching. I froze. Who else? I asked. He blinked slowly. Then one tap. Yes. Juliet checked the shed again the next morning, but it had already been cleared. The recorder? Gone. The backup tapes? Gone. Only the dust remained. Someone had entered, and not through the front gate. No signs of forced entry. No prints. They knew exactly what they were looking for, Juliet said. And where to find it. I stared at the empty shelf. A knot formed in my throat. I hadn't just missed something. I'd been outnumbered. Later that day, a black car parked across the street. It didn't belong to any neighbor. It sat idle. Tinted windows. No one came out. It stayed for 6 hours. I watched it through the blinds, pulse tight in my chest. Was it the police? A private investigator? One of Graham's old friends? That night, the car was gone. But a new tape appeared on our porch. No note. No return address. Juliet and I stared at it like it might explode. We played it. It was from years ago. A dinner party. Laughter. Silverware. And then, Graham's voice. The thing about Eleanor is, she thinks kindness is a virtue. But it's just cowardice with pearls on. Another man chuckles. And what do you do with a coward? Graham replies, you teach her fear until she calls it love. I dropped the player. Juliet turned to me, her face pale. He wasn't just talking to himself. That's when the memories returned. Little things. Whispers at the edge of my sleep. The night I heard 2 sets of footsteps in the hall, but convinced myself it was a dream. The strange calls from a blocked number Graham always answered in the garage. The letter from the bank he burned without letting me see. He had a partner. Maybe not in the legal sense, but in control. In secrecy. In watching me unravel. That night, I sat beside Graham's bed. No food. No tea. Just me. And a question. Who helped you? I asked. He didn't answer. So I leaned closer. Was it Rollins? The neighbor? No response. I tried another name. Naomi? Still nothing. But then I said, Delilah. He blinked fast. His fingers twitched. A sound caught in his throat, not words. Just breath. But something shifted in his face. Panic. I stood slowly. My legs cold. She wasn't just a victim. She knew something. And maybe she was still alive. The next morning, I called the number listed in her missing persons file. Disconnected. I called the hardware store. They had no record of her. I called the police. The case had been quietly marked inactive. No media coverage. No open leads. As if she never existed. Someone had scrubbed her clean. I hung up and stared out the window. The black car was back. I whispered, "You're not just dying, Graham." I turned to look at him, strapped into his recliner, mouth half open, eyes blank with arrogance. "You're being uncovered." I started with Delilah's last known address, a quiet apartment in Spring Hollow, 2 towns east. Juliet insisted on coming with me. We dressed like 2 women going to church, not like 2 women hunting ghosts. The landlord was old, jittery. Said he didn't remember the name. But when I showed him her photo, cropped from her driver's license in the missing person file, something flickered in his eyes. He shut the door halfway. "She moved out years ago." "When?" I asked. "Fall of 2011. The same year Graham started attending poker nights on Thursdays." "Did she say where she was going?" "No," he muttered. "But she left in a rush. Like someone was chasing her, or like she didn't want to be found." The apartment was now rented by a nurse named Ellie. But she let us look around when we told her we were from a church archive project and mentioned the name Delilah Maris. The space was small, tidy, lifeless. White walls. Beige carpet. But near the window, hidden in a wall vent, Juliet found something. A memory card. We looked at each other. My pulse kicked up. We took it home. There was only one file on the card. A video. It showed Delilah sitting in front of the same vent, eyes wide, speaking into the camera like it was her only hope. If you're watching this, it means I couldn't disappear fast enough. Graham Grant isn't who he says he is. He told me he was going to kill his wife. He told me I had to help, or he'd blame it on me. He made me move in under another name. I pretended to be his niece. No one questioned it. He's charming when he wants to be. I lied to her. To Eleanor. And I hate myself for it. But if you're listening, please tell her I'm sorry. She reached out toward the camera like she could touch me through the screen. Tell her I tried to warn her. But I ran. Because he said, she froze. The audio glitched. Because he said if I stayed, I'd end up like the others. The video cut out. The others. Juliet and I sat in silence. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. There were more? I thought of every strange smell in the garden that Graham chalked up to fertilizer. Every woman who came to his work functions and vanished by the next year. Every time he told me I was lucky to be loved. This wasn't a marriage. It was a mausoleum. That night, I found a note on Graham's tray. Not in his usual scribble. Typed. Stop. No initials. No explanation. Just that word, a command. Someone else had been in the house. Juliet checked the locks. The windows. The shed. Nothing broken. But in the hallway, behind the bookshelf, she found a microphone. Hidden in the drywall. Live. Not one of Graham's old devices. This was new. Sleek. Modern. Someone's still listening, she whispered. I stared at the mic. Realization hit me like a slap. It wasn't Graham who left the note. It was someone protecting him. That night, I fed him dinner in silence. He didn't eat much, his throat too weak. But he smirked the whole time, as if he knew something I didn't. And then he tapped the tray once. I didn't look. I cleared it without a word and went upstairs. At 2 a.m., I heard the front door creak. I slipped out of bed and peered through the banister. A figure moved through the foyer. Not Graham. Not Juliet. A woman. Tall. Dressed in black. Carrying a small silver device. I froze. Then reached for the phone. But it was already dead. The lights flickered once. Then twice. Then cut out completely. Silence. Except for the sound of something being planted. I didn't scream. Didn't move. I watched from the stairs, breath trapped in my chest, as the woman in the black coat moved through my house like she'd lived there before. She carried herself with eerie familiarity, stepping over the floorboard that creaked, opening the drawer that stuck unless you lifted the corner. She knew everything. She wasn't a thief. She wasn't lost. She belonged here. That's what terrified me most. Juliet crept down beside me, barefoot, clutching a kitchen knife. She whispered, "Who the hell is she?" I shook my head. The woman stopped in front of the grandfather clock, reached behind it, pulled out another device, small, blinking red, and slipped it into her coat. She wasn't planting something. She was collecting. Then she turned. Her eyes met mine. She didn't scream either. She just smiled. A soft, tired smile. Like we'd both been cast in the same tragic play. Then she said, "You're Eleanor." I stepped down slowly. "Who are you?" She looked at me like the answer should have been obvious. "I'm the one who made sure you survived." Her name was Margot Pierce. She had worked with Graham at the finance firm in the early 2000s. Executive assistant. Charming. Quick. Invisible in all the ways that make men underestimate you. She and Graham had shared more than paperwork. They'd shared strategies. I helped him at first, she admitted, standing in the kitchen now, unbothered by Juliet's shaking knife. Back when he just needed cover. A false trail here. A fake receipt there. He told me you were unstable. That he was afraid you'd hurt yourself. Or him. I clenched my fists. "And you believed him?" She shook her head. "No. But I wanted to." That hit harder than any lie. Margot took a breath. "He told me about Delilah. About how he planted her in your life. I helped arrange her job. Her identity. I didn't know the full extent until she vanished." Juliet snapped, "So why the hell are you still protecting him?" "I'm not," she said, calm and hollow. "I'm protecting you." Margot placed the silver device on the table. It was a jammer, one that blocked all outgoing transmissions within a 50-foot radius. "I knew he'd try to trap you," she said. "He always had contingency plans. But once the stroke hit, he couldn't manage them himself. So someone else had to." She looked up at me. And I was tired of being that someone. "Then why now?" I asked. "Why come back?" She hesitated. Then said, "Because I found the others." Juliet and I exchanged a look. Margot pulled out a folded page from her coat. It was a copy of a report, unofficial, blurred in places, from a private investigator she'd hired after Delilah disappeared. 5 names. 5 women. All had crossed paths with Graham. All had gone missing. All unsolved. Delilah had been the last, but not the only. We stood in silence as the weight of it all crashed in. Graham hadn't just hurt me. Or Delilah. He'd orchestrated a life of control. Silence. Erasure. And Margot, his co-conspirator, his witness, his shadow, had finally snapped her strings. "I don't want redemption," she said. "I want to destroy the story he tried to write." I looked at her. And for the first time in years, I felt seen by someone who had once helped blind me. We made a pact that night. No more poison. No more hiding. We would unearth every tape, every photo, every fake account. We'd go public, not through the police, but through the eyes of the world. Juliet started editing clips together. Graham's voice, Delilah's plea, my testimony. Margot made copies. Labeled everything. I watched Graham from across the room as he stared into space, unaware that his house, once his fortress, was now a war zone he was losing. He was dying, but his story wouldn't die with him. And then came the knock at the door. A man in a dark suit, holding a folder. He didn't introduce himself. He simply said, "Mr. Grant's death must be handled quietly. We expect your cooperation." I stepped forward. "He's not dead yet." The man smiled. "Not yet." The man in the suit never gave his name. Didn't ask to come in. Didn't offer a card. He handed me the folder like it was a gift. But it felt like a loaded gun. Inside, a non-disclosure agreement. Pre-written. Pre-notarized. Stamped with a private firm's logo, Vermill and Associates, not a law office I recognized, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the line on the third page. In the event of Mr. Graham Grant's death, the recipient agrees to withhold any recordings, personal accounts, or character allegations that may harm the posthumous reputation of the deceased. A check was clipped to the back. $75,000. Blood money. I stared at it. Then looked at the man. "You think I care about his reputation?" He didn't blink. "We think you care about peace. This will guarantee it. For you. For your niece. For anyone who might be implicated." My skin crawled. "You think I poisoned him," I whispered. He gave a shallow smile. "We think people talk. And stories spread. And sometimes, it's better for everyone if the story simply ends." I stepped back. "Get off my property." "You have 3 days," he said. Then he turned and left. Juliet wanted to burn the papers. Margot wanted to trace the firm, dig into who was funding the hush. I wanted to scream. But all I could do was stand at the sink, hands trembling, heart pounding. He was still controlling us, even from that recliner. Even as his voice faded and his limbs curled inward. He wasn't dying. He was winning. Until 4 p.m. when the doorbell rang again. This time, it was a woman. Young. Maybe 30. Dark hair pulled back in a braid. A travel bag slung over one shoulder. She looked nervous. Fragile, but determined. "Are you Eleanor Grant?" she asked. "I am. I think I'm Delilah Maris's daughter." The world tilted. I opened the door fully. "Come in." Her name was B. Short for Beatrice. 29. Raised in foster care after her mother disappeared. No siblings. No real records. But last year, a DNA website connected her to a distant cousin, and a genetic match came back, linked to Delilah. That led her to a message board for cold cases. And to Graham's name. And then to mine. "I don't want money," she said. "I want the truth." I stared at her face. The curve of her jaw. Her eyes, wide, cautious, fierce. She looked just like the video. I whispered. She tried to save me. "I know," B said. Her voice cracked. "And I think someone made her disappear on purpose." Juliet stood frozen. Margot sat down like the weight of it had crushed her. "She was pregnant when she vanished," B said. "Barely showing." But she wrote about it in a journal. She thought the baby would change him. I closed my eyes. He'd known. Graham had known Delilah was carrying his child. And he still let her disappear. Later that night, after B went to sleep in the guest room, I stood over Graham's chair. He looked smaller than ever. A dying spider in a velvet web. I leaned in. "She had your child." He blinked once. "She named her Beatrice." His lips twitched. And for the first time, I saw regret. Not guilt. Not fear. Regret that I knew. I whispered, "She's going to destroy you." Then I tucked the blanket tighter around his legs and turned off the light. In the shadows of my room, I held the DNA report be brought. It confirmed everything. But more than that, it proved Delilah was never just a pawn. She was a mother. A whistleblower. A woman trying to escape. And now, her daughter would finish what she started. We started in the attic. Vi insisted on helping. She wore gloves, tied her hair back, and moved with a quiet fury, not the kind that burned loud, but the kind that refused to fade. The kind that mothers pass to daughters without ever meaning to. "I think she left something," Vi said. "She never would have run without a plan. Not without leaving something for me." I nodded. "Your mother was braver than I was." She saw him clearly. "You left him too," she said. "Not soon enough." The attic was a graveyard of forgotten things. Graham's old tax folders, Christmas decorations we never used, dusty trunks full of nothing but staged memories. Then, at the bottom of an old cedar chest, wrapped in a towel and tucked beneath cracked photo albums, a camera. Not digital. Mini DV cassette model. Heavy. Quiet. Unlabeled. Juliet met us downstairs with her laptop and a converter cord. She said nothing, just plugged it in and pressed play. The screen crackled to life. And there he was. Graham. In his wheelchair. Slumped, but speaking. His voice was slurred, heavy from the stroke, but unmistakably real. Recorded after his supposed muteness began. The timestamp confirmed it. If you're watching this, you've already failed. I know you think you're winning. Eleanor. Juliet. Whoever else you brought into this circus. But you don't understand the game. People don't care about the truth. They care about the version that makes them feel safe. And no one wants to believe an old woman could murder a man in his sleep. So go ahead. Leak your tapes. Show your letters. You'll be dismissed as bitter. Hysterical. Lonely. He chuckled. A gurgling, sickening sound. I built that house for you, Eleanor. Every room, every camera, every moment, it was a stage. You just kept playing the role I gave you. Even now, you think you're rewriting the script. He leaned forward, looked directly into the lens. But I rehearsed the ending too. And you don't survive it. The screen cut to black. Silence swallowed the room. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Juliet whispered, "He's been faking. Speaking. Recording." BA's hands shook. "He wanted to frame you," she said. "No," I said. "He wanted to punish me." This wasn't about survival. It was about performance. His final act. A backup plan if I ever found the truth. That tape wasn't just insurance. It was a trap. If it leaked, it could twist the entire story, make me look like the villain. The manipulative widow. The caregiver who poisoned a mute husband. And the worst part? People would believe it. Because that's what he always counted on. But B was shaking her head. "No," she said. "He miscalculated. He thought fear would shut you down. He didn't count on me." She stood up, fire in her eyes. "You're not going to leak that tape." Juliet stared. "What?" "We're going to bury it. And we're going to leak everything else." She turned to me. "Delilah's video. Your recordings. The missing women. The truth. That tape only exists to poison the well. He wants control, even now. We take that away." I hesitated. "But it proves he could speak." He placed a hand on my arm. "So we say we recorded him. We say it was his final confession. That he admitted everything. Before he died." I stared at her. "That's dangerous." She smiled. So was he. That night, I sat by Graham one last time. He looked worse, or maybe smaller. Less human. I whispered, "Delilah's daughter is here." His eyes flickered. Rage. Panic. Something primal. "She remembers everything," I said. "And she's not afraid of you." He tried to lift a hand. Couldn't. I leaned close. "You rehearsed every ending, but this one, the one where the women you silence speak louder than you ever could." I placed the fake confession tape back in the box with the others, as our insurance. Not his. And I whispered, "Rest well, Graham." Then I turned off the light. We released the videos in parts. First came Delilah's tearful confession, layered with the audio of Graham rehearsing her downfall. Then clips of his mute moments, speaking clearly to the camera after the stroke. Juliet wove it together with stark titles and grainy subtitles. We didn't use drama. We used facts. We let his voice undo him. By morning, it had over 600,000 views. By nightfall, it passed 2 million. The comments were brutal. He's a monster. How many women did he do this to? That old bastard was faking being mute? I believe every word she says. I've seen men like this. And, just like that, the house that once imprisoned me became a war memorial. People sent letters, flowers, stories of their own. Messages like, "You helped me leave. You saved my mother." I wish I'd spoken sooner, too. We didn't give interviews. Didn't take money. We told the truth and watched it echo. But then came the voicemail. It was a soft, creaking voice. Frail but sure. "Hello. My name is Margaret O'Hara. I saw your video. I was married to Graham Grant. In 1971. Before he changed his name. I thought he was dead. I need to speak with you. Because I know where one of the women is buried." I dropped the phone. We met her at a nursing home 2 towns north. She walked with a cane and wore a cardigan lined with stitched violets. Her hands trembled when she held mine. "Graham wasn't always that name," she said. "He was born Jonathan Greaves. Changed his name before we moved west. Said he wanted to reinvent himself. She'd been 17 when they married. He was 29. She described him just the way I remembered, charming, controlling, unpredictable. He used to lock me in the root cellar for days," she said, voice cracking. "Once I miscarried down there. He didn't even ask if the baby had a name." Juliet clutched her hands over her mouth. Bea asked gently, "How did you get away?" Margaret looked up. "I didn't. He left me. Took everything. Erased my name from the records. Told everyone I was dead." She paused. I believed I was. She gave us an old map, hand-drawn, faded. It marked a place in the woods behind their old property. Near a well. "He buried something there," she said. Said it was a mistake that wouldn't be made twice. I was too afraid to look. But now, I think it was someone. A woman. We sent the map to authorities. 2 days later, they found human remains near the marked site. Dental records pending. The news ran with it. Former financier linked to cold case body. Graham Grant's victims continued to surface. But we knew it was only the beginning. Because Margaret had brought something else, a black and white photo, torn at the edges. It showed Graham. Young. Smiling. Between 2 women. One was Margaret. The other. Delilah. I stared at it. "It's not possible," I whispered. "They didn't know each other." Margaret shook her head. "They did. He told me she was a new employee." "A random girl, no," she said. "That photo's from 2006. She was around long before you ever saw her." I reeled. He'd been grooming her that long. Delilah wasn't just a pawn. She was part of a plan that spanned decades, started long before she knew she was trapped. Margaret placed a shaky hand on mine. "Some men don't need cages. They carry them with them. And they teach us how to fit inside." I nodded. And for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of every woman who had ever escaped a man like Graham and survived just enough to speak. That night, I stood by his bed. Graham couldn't move much now. His face sagged. His hands twitched. But he watched me, eyes burning. "You were never alone," I whispered. "You made us think we were. But you left too many ghosts. And now, we're speaking for each other." He tried to blink. But I turned away. Because this time, I wasn't watching him. I was watching all of them rise. We found the page folded between the liner of a music box Delilah had kept in the attic, one Margot recovered just before she left town. It played no tune. The winding key was broken. But inside, hidden behind the velvet lining, was a single page. Torn. Folded 5 times. Smudged at the corners. Bea read it aloud. Her voice trembled. He told me she was soft. That she cried when the mail came late. That she apologized to spiders before killing them. He said she was the perfect test. That if she stayed long enough, She'd believe she was the one who needed him. He looked at me. Her voice broke. He said if she could survive the house, he'd finally know how much cruelty a woman could take before disappearing from the inside. I couldn't breathe. Graham hadn't married me because he loved me. He married me to watch me collapse. To study it. He'd chosen me like a scientist chooses a lab mouse. My kindness, the thing I thought made me human, was the reason he picked me. And every smile, every apology, every compromise, was proof that his experiment was working. Juliet sat beside me, speechless. She clenched the paper, her hands shaking. "This is why she stayed," she whispered. "Delilah. She thought if she played along, she could protect you. Maybe expose him. Maybe save you." Tears fell without permission. She didn't just stay out of fear. She stayed for me. That night, I sat at my desk and pulled out my old wedding photo. Graham looked dashing. I looked so small. I turned it over and wrote, "She wasn't weak. She was chosen." He mistook empathy for submission. But he forgot what kindness becomes when it's betrayed. It becomes fury. And it never forgets. We released Delilah's final journal entry online the next day. Over 1 million views in 12 hours. The comments were different now, deeper, more shaken. He studied her like a lab rat. I've lived that too. No one talks about this kind of abuse, the kind that wears your own goodness against you. Tell them. Tell all of it. And so we did. A university reached out for a documentary deal. A filmmaker offered to produce a series. B declined both. "This isn't entertainment," she said. "It's evidence." Juliet built a digital archive, the Delilah Files, open to the public. Thousands of survivors submitted their own stories. We didn't just break Graham's legacy. We replaced it with voices louder than his. Graham's health failed rapidly after that. As if our truth stripped him of the oxygen he used to control us. The doctors said his heart gave out. But I think it was something deeper. Maybe cruelty only thrives when it's believed. And once it's not, it dies. Just like he did. We held no ceremony. Graham's body was taken by the county. No flowers. No obituary. No prayers. Just silence, the kind that doesn't mourn, but clears space. I thought it was over. I was wrong. It was raining when she arrived. A black umbrella. A long silk scarf. Pearls that glistened like truth dipped in poison. She walked up the driveway like she owned it. B opened the door. Froze. The woman smiled, polite and cutting. "I'm looking for Mrs. Eleanor Grant." "I'm Eleanor," I said, stepping forward. She extended her hand. "My name is Corinne." A pause. "I'm Graham's wife." The world didn't tilt. It collapsed. B stared. Juliet's hand dropped the phone. Corinne held out an envelope, thick, crisp. Legal seals. Gold ink. Graham and I were married in Delaware. 2019. Private ceremony. He didn't want it public. I respected that. I shook my head. "That's not possible." "Oh, it is." She smiled. "He divorced you in 2018. Quietly. Filed the paperwork himself. I have copies. Signed." She handed me a document. I scanned it. The signature, my name, was forged. Perfectly. B whispered, "He erased you." Again. Corinne didn't flinch. "I'm not here to fight. I just want what I'm owed." "Owed?" Juliet snapped. "I'm his legal widow," Corinne said. "And according to this will, I inherit the house and any media derived from his name or likeness." She pulled out a second document. Signed. Notarized. Backdated 2 years. "He wanted to protect his legacy," she said. "From women like you." I felt cold. This wasn't just a legal move. It was his last play. He'd married someone else. Lied again. Faked a divorce. And written a will, not to pass down wealth, but to erase the evidence. Juliet stepped forward. "Even if that will's real, the recordings, the testimonies, the archives, they're not his. They're ours." Corinne shrugged. "The internet won't care. They'll see a grieving wife and a bitter ex. That's all it takes to plant doubt." She turned to leave. "I'll give you a week to vacate the property. Or I file for possession." She looked at me one last time. "He said you'd try to make yourself the victim." And then she was gone. That night, We found a photo in one of the hard drives we hadn't reviewed yet. It was from 2019. Graham and Corinne, in front of a cabin, and Delilah in the background. Blurry, eyes wide, holding a bag, walking away. BEA's hands trembled. She was alive. In 2019. I leaned closer and froze. The bag she carried. It was my mother's, one Graham kept in the attic. Delilah hadn't just survived. She had taken something with her. Where was that photo taken? Juliet asked. We scanned the metadata. GPS coordinates embedded. Somewhere in Montana. I whispered he didn't kill her. B looked up, eyes wide. He hit her. And if she was still out there, she might be the only one who could legally destroy Corinne's claim. The road to Montana felt like a rewind button pressed on my life. Each mile peeled back layers of my denial, the idea that it was all over, that truth would set us free. Truth doesn't set you free. It makes you responsible. B sat beside me, hands clutching the photo. She'd memorized every tree, every blur of cloud, every sliver of Delilah's outline. We didn't know if she was alive, but we had to believe she was still herself. We reached the cabin on the third day. Remote. Hidden by tall pines and snow-laced dirt. The kind of place people choose to disappear into. B went first. Knocked once. Then again. No answer. She looked back at me, eyes tight with hope and fear. I stepped forward and whispered, Delilah? It's Eleanor. And this is your daughter. A long silence. Then the door creaked open. She hadn't aged much. Still beautiful. Still guarded. But thinner. Her hair streaked with gray, tied back. Her eyes darted over us like we might be a trap. B, she said softly. Her voice cracked. B dropped the photo. Her hands shook. Mom. Delilah staggered back and pressed a hand to her mouth. She didn't cry. She just stood there like her body was remembering how to feel. And then, she opened the door fully. Inside, the cabin was warm but bare. No TV. No internet. No signs of the past. Just firewood, canned food, and a pile of handwritten notebooks stacked in the corner. Delilah poured tea without a word. B stared at her, trying not to collapse. Finally, Delilah sat and spoke. I didn't think anyone would ever find me. You ran, I said gently. She nodded. I had to. He said if I stayed, he'd kill me in front of her. Her eyes flicked to B. He said I could disappear, or he'd erase her future too. I felt sick. B whispered, he told me you were dead. Delilah reached across the table and touched her hand. I was. For a long time. We explained everything, the recordings, the archive, Corinne's forged will, the house. Her name wasn't in the legal battles, but if she came forward, she could challenge everything. Delilah went quiet. You want me to go back? She asked. No, I said. We want you to end what he started. She looked at B. I've kept her safe by staying hidden. You want me to blow that up? BEA's voice broke. You're not protecting me anymore. I'm protecting you now. That night, Delilah opened the notebooks. Pages and pages. Confessions. Memories. Names. Codes. Every woman Graham hurt. Every manipulation. Every lie. He'd told her his secrets in pieces to scare her, to own her. She'd written it all down. She handed one notebook to me. He called it the mirror test, she said. He said if a woman could still look at herself after everything he did to her, then she wasn't worth keeping. I clutched the book to my chest. He was wrong, I said. You didn't disappear. You survived. Delilah looked at B, really looked at her. Then whispered, I'll come back. The next morning, before we left, she buried something under the pine tree behind her cabin. Notebooks. Her old identity. Photos of her past. I'll be Delilah again in court, she said. But just long enough to finish him. B nodded. And as we walked back to the car, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in years. I didn't look afraid. I looked ready. We walked into the courthouse together, 3 women scarred by the same man, finally standing as one. Delilah wore a gray suit, no makeup. Her hair pinned tight. Not to impress anyone, but to own the narrative. B walked beside her like a bodyguard. And me? I brought the truth. even if it ruined me. Corinne sat at the other end of the courtroom, flanked by a team of lawyers. Black dress, black heels, a pearl pin shaped like a dagger. She didn't look at us. She didn't have to. She thought she had already won. But when Delilah's name was read aloud as a living witness, a former partner, and the biological mother of Graham's only child, Corinne's face cracked. Just a little. Enough for us to know she hadn't seen it coming. The judge reviewed the petition. Forgery, fraudulent divorce, bigamy, will tampering, estate manipulation. Delilah submitted her DNA match with B. Juliet submitted the metadata from Graham's fake confession video, proving it had been filmed in secret long after his stroke. But all of that was just set up. The turning point came when I was called to testify. I took the stand, swore the oath, then stared out across the courtroom. Cameras, spectators, survivors, women who looked like me, women who were me. I told the story. From the beginning. The lies, the gaslighting, the bruises that didn't show, the praise that felt like poison, the silence that killed a little more of me every year. And then I told the truth. After his stroke, when he could no longer walk or scream, I started feeding him small doses of foxglove powder. It slowed his heart. It hurt him. Quietly, a murmur rippled through the room. I kept speaking. I knew what I was doing. I did it slowly, carefully. I wanted him to know what it felt like to fade, to be invisible, to be helpless in a chair while someone smiled and spooned you soup. Corinne stood. Objection. This is a criminal admission. The judge slammed the gavel. Overruled. She was invited to give sworn testimony under the whistleblower and survivor clause. The immunity stands. The courtroom broke into chaos. But I didn't move. I watched Corinne. Her mask cracked completely now. Because she knew. The case was lost. Delilah stood next. She read one page from her journal. Just one. He told me women are like ink. Beautiful. Useful. And made to smear. She closed the book. And now he's the one who's fading. The court awarded full legal rights to Delilah as Graham's surviving spouse. The will was declared fraudulent. Corinne was charged with knowingly presenting forged documents. And as she was let out, she turned to me and hissed, "You think this is justice?" I met her eyes. "No," I said. "This is accountability." That night, we sat in the kitchen. The same kitchen where I had once stirred poison into soup. But this time, we ate together. Pasta. Wine. Laughter. Juliet queued up an email. The final chapter of the Delilah files, ready to go live. Delilah asked softly, "What should we call it?" I looked at her. At B. At the women we used to be, and the ones we'd become. And I said, "Let's call it the truth." The envelope came 2 days after the verdict. No return address. No postage. Just slid under the door like a threat. I almost threw it away. But something about the handwriting, tilted, familiar, stopped me. It was Graham's. Inside, a letter. Folded once. Written in the same ink he used for our wedding vows. To my dear Eleanor, you think you've won. But even victory can be a prison if you wear it long enough. Did it satisfy you feeding me poison like I once fed you silence? Did it make you feel powerful? Or did it remind you that you're still mine? I've left something behind. Something no one else knows about. It's under the floorboards in the study. The fourth plank. You always stepped over it when you were angry. Go on. Open it. You'll find the truth you never dared to ask for. Unless, of course, you're still afraid of who you were when you were with me. Yours until the last drop. I sat there for a long time, letter trembling in my hands. Juliet begged me to burn it. B said he was trying to get in my head. Delilah stayed quiet. And then she whispered, "You should open it." The study hadn't changed. The dust still gathered around the chair he used to sit in, the same chair where I'd crushed pills and stirred secrets. I found the fourth plank easily. Pried it up. Inside, a sealed tin box. Inside the box, a flash drive, a key, and a single Polaroid. It was me, 19, freshly married, smiling, holding a cake I hadn't baked. And behind me, a whiteboard, with names on it, dates, predictions, arrows. I stared, then looked closer. They weren't just names. They were mine. Versions of me. Eleanor, 1997, quiet, obedient, meal skipping. Eleanor, 2003, beginning to resist. Increase isolation. Eleanor, 2008, potential risk. Introduce medication. Remove mirrors. My blood ran cold. It was a log. A study. Of me. Juliet gasped when I showed her. Delilah collapsed into a chair. B said, he was testing you. Every year. Every change. He documented it like a scientist observing an animal. And the flash drive? It held a full journal. Hundreds of entries. Graphs. Video clips. Some recorded when I didn't know the cameras were on. Graham had cataloged my entire breakdown. But that wasn't the worst part. The key. It matched a storage unit. Across state lines. Under a false name. Delilah stared at the key. He never stopped preparing for exposure, she said. He stored backups. Just in case. That's where Corinne got her copy of the will. There might be more. I didn't speak. Because all I could hear were his words. You'll find the truth you never dared to ask for. That night, I stood in front of the fireplace. Flash drive in one hand. Letter in the other. I dropped the letter into the flames. Watched it curl into nothing. But the drive? I kept it. Not because I wanted his legacy, but because I needed the world to see that some men don't just commit crimes. They build careers out of them. The storage unit was exactly where the key said it would be, Unit 46, on the edge of a dusty lot in northern Wyoming. Registered under a fake name, Nolan Corwin. Paid 5 years in advance. We cut the lock. Inside was a metal cabinet, locked tight. One shelf. One hard drive. And one folder. Labeled, Subject, B, Maris. Phase 2B stared at it like it was ticking. I was just a child, she whispered. I opened the folder. And what we read changed everything. Inside, timelines. Observational notes. Clippings of BA's school reports, old photographs, even a copy of a therapist's intake form from when she was 9, one B swore she'd never seen before. He had tracked her. For years. Subject shows early signs of verbal resistance. Defiant streak similar to mother's. Potential to redirect emotional need toward paternal figure. Risk, inherited memory of abuse. Will require intervention before age 18. Delilah gasped. He wasn't afraid we'd expose him, she said. He was preparing to inherit her future. B sat down on the concrete floor, shaking. This is why he let me live. Why he didn't kill her. He thought he could mold me. Shape me like he shaped you both. Her voice cracked. He was planning to turn me into him. The hard drive contained video files. Some labeled by year. Others by name. Not just Eleanor. Not just Delilah. Others. Women we'd never met. Most marked with numbers. Only one clip had audio. Graham's voice. The key is to catch them when they're young. Before they learn that kindness is optional. Before they understand they can say no. The women don't matter. The daughters do. They're blank slates. You don't destroy a generation by beating its mothers. You destroy it by teaching its daughters how to become you. Delilah covered her mouth. B reached for the plug and yanked it out. I've heard enough. Outside, the wind cut across the plain. Empty. Unforgiving. I looked at them, the woman he married to test empathy, and the daughter he planned to groom into his heir. And I realized, this wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about stopping the infection. Because Graham wasn't just one man. He was a manual. A blueprint of how control hides in love, how abuse hides in routine, how legacy hides in silence. And we had the chance to burn it. We mailed copies of everything to the FBI, to investigative reporters, to national abuse networks. We gave names, files, evidence. We leaked the clip. The internet erupted. He was building successors. He wanted to turn survivors into monsters. How many men are following this model? Delilah watched from the porch, silent. B sat beside her and held her hand. That night, I packed a final envelope. One last copy of the drive. And I wrote on it, in case someone ever questions what he was, don't let them forget. Because some men die in silence. and others leave whispers behind. But the worst ones? They leave instructions. Before you scroll away, I need you to hear this. Not because I need your sympathy, I don't. Not even because you believe me, though I hope you do. But because one day, you may see someone like him. And I pray you'll recognize what we didn't, before it's too late. The morning after we burned the last of the files, I baked a pie. Lemon. His favorite. Except this time, it wasn't for Graham. It was for us. I lit a candle. Sat with Bea, Delilah, and Juliet around the same kitchen table where I had once stirred poison with trembling hands. Now, the only thing I stirred was cream. And no one was pretending anymore. Delilah spoke at the Survivors Summit 2 weeks later. Her voice shook at first, but when she said, "He studied me like a subject, but I was never his experiment, I was his undoing," the crowd rose to their feet. Juliet turned the Delilah files into a global archive. Within a month, hundreds of new names had joined. And Bea? She shocked us all. She didn't disappear. Didn't retreat into fear. She stood before the National Board of Trauma Education and announced, "My father wanted me to carry on his cruelty. But I will spend the rest of my life dismantling men like him." She launched a foundation. Phase 2, not his version, hers. A recovery center. A school for girls learning how to speak before they're ever taught to shrink. A place where silence is not a sentence, it's a choice. As for me, I kept the house. Not to live in. To teach in. I host a weekly circle for older women like me, who smile in public but ache in private. Who've been told they're too soft, too late, too quiet. I sit at that same table every Thursday and say, "He tested how far I'd bend. But he never thought I'd snap back." Sometimes, when the wind moves through the cracks in the walls, I swear I hear his voice. But it doesn't scare me anymore. Because now I know what he feared most. Not exposure. Not justice. Not even death. He feared women remembering. And worse, telling each other. So if you've ever doubted your story, if you've ever questioned the scream you swallowed, let mine echo loud enough to remind you, survival is not silence. It's a scream passed hand to hand, until no one walks alone. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe to Whispers and Wills and tell me. Have you ever seen someone smile the way I used to? Then promise me, you'll ask what's behind it. Because sometimes, the kitchen holds more than food. It holds confessions. And some of them just might save a life.